Welcome back to the Historian's Tome. Before we begin tonight's journey into the ancient past, take a moment to get comfortable. Adjust your pillows, settle into your favorite position, and let yourself relax. If you enjoy these stories from history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We're curious, where are you watching from tonight? Is it late evening where you are, or perhaps the middle of the night? Whatever time it is, we're glad you're here. Tonight, we'll explore the mysterious dolmens scattered across Europe, those remarkable stone monuments built by people who lived thousands of years ago. Let your mind drift back through time as we uncover their secrets together. The morning mist hung low over the Irish countryside as a farmer walked across his fields in the year 1699. His name was Thomas Molyneux, and he was not just any farmer, but a curious scholar who noticed things others might overlook. As he crossed a particular field he had walked many times before, something caught his eye. Rising from the earth like giants frozen in time stood several massive stones arranged in a peculiar pattern. 3 large stones formed walls, and an enormous flat stone lay across the top like a roof. The structure was unlike anything in the villages nearby. Molyneux stopped and stared. He walked around the monument, touching the cold stone with his hands. The rocks were covered in lichen and moss, suggesting they had stood there for a very long time. He noticed how perfectly the top stone balanced on the upright ones, despite weighing what must have been several tons. Who could have built such a thing? And more importantly, why? This was not the first time someone had stumbled upon such structures. All across Europe, from the coasts of Portugal to the hills of Sweden, similar monuments had been standing for thousands of years. Local people often knew about them and had their own stories to explain their presence. Some said they were the homes of giants from ancient times. Others believed they were natural formations, stones that had somehow arranged themselves through the forces of nature. Still others thought they were the work of magic or spirits. The word dolmen comes from the Breton language spoken in the northwestern part of France. It combines 2 words, tol, meaning table, and men, meaning stone. Together they create a perfect description of what these monuments look like: a stone table. When you see a dolmen for the first time, this name makes immediate sense. The massive capstone lying across the upright supports does indeed look like a table made for giants. But Molyneux and other scholars of his time began to suspect something different. These were not natural formations or magical creations. They were built by human hands in a time so distant that all memory of their builders had faded away. The stones showed signs of careful placement and deliberate design. Some had been shaped or smoothed. The way they fit together suggested planning and effort. As the 18th century progressed, more people began to take notice of these ancient structures. Travelers crossing the European countryside would sketch them in their journals. Antiquarians, the historians of that era, started to catalogue and study them. They measured the stones, made drawings, and tried to understand their purpose. Each discovery led to more questions. In France, particularly in the region of Brittany, dolmens seemed to be everywhere. Some stood alone in fields. Others appeared in groups, creating what looked like ancient cemeteries or gathering places. The same was true in Ireland, where the monuments dotted the landscape. In Britain, Wales, and Scotland, similar structures could be found. Even as far south as Spain and Portugal, and as far north as Denmark and Sweden, these stone monuments marked the land. What amazed early researchers was the similarity between dolmens found hundreds of miles apart. A dolmen in Ireland looked remarkably similar to one in southern France, despite the great distance between them. This suggested that either the same group of people had built them across this vast area, or different groups had somehow shared the same idea and building techniques. The stones themselves were impressive in their size and weight. Many capstones weighed between 20 and 50 tons. Some were even heavier. Moving such massive rocks would be difficult even today with modern equipment. Imagining how ancient people accomplished this feat without wheels, without metal tools, and without machines stretched the imagination. Early theories about the dolmens varied wildly. Some scholars thought they were altars where ancient priests performed ceremonies. Others believed they were boundary markers showing the edge of territories. A few suggested they were astronomical observatories, aligned with the sun or stars to mark important dates in the calendar. But as more dolmens were carefully examined, a pattern began to emerge that pointed to a different purpose entirely. Inside many dolmens, excavators found human bones. Sometimes just a few fragments remained, worn down by thousands of years in the earth. Other times, the remains of multiple individuals could be identified. Along with the bones, they found objects, pottery shards, stone tools, beads, and occasionally items made of copper or bronze. These were grave goods, objects placed with the dead for their journey to the afterlife. The conclusion became clear. Dolmens were tombs. They were burial monuments built by communities in the distant past to house their dead. But they were not simple graves. The effort required to build them, the size and permanence of the structures, and the way they dominated the landscape all suggested these were important places. These monuments were meant to last, to be seen, and to be remembered. As night deepens around you now, imagine standing before one of these ancient dolmens. Feel the rough texture of the stone beneath your fingers. See how the massive capstone blocks out a portion of the sky above. Consider the hands that placed these stones so long ago, and the communities that gathered here to honor their dead. Let these images settle in your mind as we move deeper into the story of these mysterious monuments. To understand the dolmens, we must first understand the time in which they were built. We call this period the Neolithic, which means the New Stone Age. It was a time of great change in human history, perhaps the most important transformation our ancestors ever experienced. People were learning to farm, to keep animals, and to live in permanent settlements. This happened roughly between 10,000 and 4,000 years ago, though the exact dates varied across different parts of Europe. Before the Neolithic, humans lived as hunters and gatherers. They moved with the seasons, following animal herds and seeking out wild plants to eat. They lived in small groups and left few permanent marks on the landscape. But during the Neolithic, everything changed. People discovered they could plant seeds and grow their own food. They learned to domesticate wild animals like cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. These discoveries meant they no longer needed to constantly travel in search of food. With farming came settlements. People built houses and villages. They cleared forests to create fields for their crops. They made pottery to store grain and cook food. They wove cloth from plant fibers and animal wool. Population grew because farming could support more people in one area than hunting and gathering ever could. Communities became larger and more complex. But farming also brought new challenges and new ways of thinking. Farmers needed to plan for the future. They had to save seed for next year's planting. They had to think about the seasons, about when to plant and when to harvest. They developed a deeper connection to specific places because their fields and homes were not easily abandoned. The land where their ancestors were buried became sacred. This is where the dolmens enter the story. As Neolithic communities grew and prospered, they began to create monuments. These were not just practical structures like houses or storage buildings. They were symbolic places, meant to connect the living with the dead and with the land itself. Building a dolmen was a community effort that required planning, cooperation, and considerable physical labor. Think about what it took to build even a modest dolmen. First, suitable stones had to be found. These could not be just any rocks. They needed to be large, flat slabs of stone that could serve as walls and roof. In some places, suitable stones could be found lying on the surface or in shallow quarries. In other places, builders had to split larger rocks or transport stones from distant locations. The transportation of these massive stones was itself a remarkable feat. Without wheels or beasts of burden strong enough to move such weights, Neolithic people relied on human power and clever techniques. They likely used wooden rollers, placing logs underneath the stones and rolling them along. They may have used sledges, flat platforms on which the stone could be dragged. In winter, ice and snow might have made moving stones easier. Some researchers have conducted experiments to understand how this could have been done. They found that a group of 200 people, working together with ropes and wooden tools, could move a stone weighing 30 tons. It would be slow, exhausting work, but it was possible. The key was cooperation. Every person had to pull at the same time, responding to signals from leaders who coordinated the effort. Once the stones reached their destination, the real work began. Holes had to be dug to receive the upright stones that would form the chamber walls. These holes needed to be deep enough to hold the stones securely. The upright stones, called orthostats, had to be tilted into position and then raised vertical. This probably involved digging a sloping ramp on one side of the hole, sliding the stone down into it, and then using levers and ropes to pull it upright. After the wall stones were in place, the most dangerous task remained, placing the capstone on top. This enormous slab, often weighing more than all the other stones combined, had to be lifted to the height of the chamber walls. The most likely method involved building an earthen ramp that sloped up to the top of the uprights. The capstone would be dragged up this ramp, positioned carefully, and then the ramp would be removed, leaving the capstone resting on the uprights. The entire process might take months or even years. It required not just physical effort, but also significant resources. The workers needed to be fed during this time. Tools wore out and had to be replaced. There must have been leaders who planned the work and specialists who understood the techniques. Building a dolmen was a major undertaking that demonstrated the organizational capacity of Neolithic communities. But why go to all this trouble? The answer lies in the purpose of these monuments. Dolmens were not built for practical shelter. They were built to create a permanent place for the dead. In doing so, they made a statement about the community's connection to its land and its past. The dolmen said, "We have been here, we are here now, and we will remain here. Our ancestors rest in this place, and their presence blesses our fields and protects our homes." Many dolmens were used for generations. Excavations show that bodies were added over time, sometimes over hundreds of years. This means the dolmen was reopened periodically to receive new burials. It was a living part of the community, not a sealed tomb built once and forgotten. Families would return to the dolmen to place their dead alongside their ancestors, creating a physical link between past and present. The bones inside dolmens tell us something about Neolithic life. Studies of the remains show that these were farming people who ate grain and animal products. Their bones reveal the physical stress of agricultural labor. Some show signs of injuries or disease. The presence of children and elderly individuals alongside adults suggests these were family tombs, not monuments reserved for warriors or leaders alone. As you rest now, imagine the sound of stone scraping against stone as ancient builders worked. Picture the earthen ramp rising beside the dolmen chamber. See the capstone inching upward as dozens of people pull on ropes, moving in rhythm to a song or chant that help them coordinate their efforts. Feel the satisfaction when the stone finally settles into place and the structure is complete. Let these scenes carry you deeper into relaxation as we continue our journey through time. The dolmens were never built in isolation. They were part of larger sacred landscapes where ancient people gathered, performed ceremonies, and connected with powers they believed shaped their world. Understanding where dolmens were placed and what surrounded them helps us understand how Neolithic people saw the world around them. Across Europe, dolmens were often built in prominent locations. Some stood on hilltops where they could be seen from great distances. Others were placed at the edges of valleys or near rivers and springs. The locations were carefully chosen. These were not random spots, but places that held significance for the communities that built them. In the region of Carnac in Brittany, France, one of the most extraordinary concentrations of Neolithic monuments can be found. Here, thousands of standing stones called menhirs are arranged in long rows that stretch across the landscape. Among these stone alignments, numerous dolmens were built. The combination of standing stones and burial monuments creates a landscape that was clearly sacred to the people who lived there between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. Walking through Karnak today, even as a modern visitor, you cannot help but feel the power of this place. The stones march across the fields in perfect lines, some standing taller than a person, others barely rising above the ground. The dolmens appear at intervals, their massive capstones still balanced on their supports after all these centuries. In Neolithic times, when these monuments were new and the landscape around them was managed and maintained by the communities that built them, the effect must have been overwhelming. Sacred landscapes like Karnak were not created quickly. They evolved over many generations as different communities added their own monuments to those of their ancestors. A dolmen built by one generation might inspire descendants to build another nearby. Over time, these sacred areas grew to include not just dolmens, but also standing stones, stone circles, burial mounds, and other features whose exact purpose remains mysterious to us. Water seems to have played an important role in the placement of many dolmens. Springs, which never dried up even in the driest summers, were often located near dolmen sites. Rivers and streams marked boundaries and provided routes for travel and trade. The sea, with its endless movements and mysterious depths, formed a natural boundary for coastal communities and may have held symbolic importance related to death and the afterlife. Some researchers have noticed that certain dolmens align with astronomical events. The entrance passages of some monuments point toward the place on the horizon where the sun rises on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Others align with the summer solstice or with the positions of certain stars. These alignments suggest that Neolithic people paid careful attention to the movements of celestial bodies and incorporated this knowledge into their monuments. The most famous example of this is Newgrange in Ireland, though it is technically not a simple dolmen, but a passage tomb with dolmen-like characteristics. At Newgrange, the passage is aligned so that on the morning of the winter solstice, sunlight enters through a special opening above the entrance and illuminates the inner chamber. For just a few minutes, light penetrates the darkness where the bones of the ancestors rest. This must have been a powerful moment for those who witnessed it, suggesting that death was not the end but part of a cycle as eternal as the sun's journey across the sky. Many dolmens were originally covered by earthen mounds called cairns or barrows. These mounds, made of piled earth or stones, completely enclosed the dolmen so that only the entrance remained visible. Over thousands of years, many of these mounds have eroded away, leaving the stone skeleton of the dolmen exposed. When we see a dolmen standing bare in a field today, we are looking at what remains after the earth that once covered it has worn away. When the mounds were intact, the landscape would have looked quite different. Instead of seeing the individual stones, you would see large earthen hills, sometimes decorated or marked with special stones. The entrance to the dolmen would appear as a dark opening in the side of the mound, a portal between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Communities gathered at these sacred places for ceremonies we can only imagine. They probably held funeral rites when new bodies were placed in the dolmens. They may have returned on special days of the year to honor the ancestors and ask for their blessing. These gatherings would have reinforced social bonds, reminded people of their shared history, and connected them to the land their ancestors had farmed and protected. The sacred landscapes were also practical gathering places. Large, flat areas near megalithic monuments may have served as marketplaces where different communities traded goods. The monuments themselves served as landmarks, helping people navigate and marking territory. A traveling merchant or farmer could give directions by referring to specific dolmens or standing stones that everyone in the region would recognize. Some dolmens show signs of having been maintained and cared for long after they were built. Repairs were made when stones shifted. The entrances were kept clear. This suggests these places remained important for many generations, not just for the original builders. The continuity of use and care shows that the traditions and beliefs surrounding the dolmens were passed down through time. In certain regions, legends and folklore about dolmens persisted into historical times, even though the people telling these stories had no direct knowledge of who built the monuments or why. In Ireland, dolmens were sometimes called beds of Diarmuid and Groin, referring to characters from Celtic mythology. In France, similar stories attributed them to giants or to the fairy folk. These later stories, while not historically accurate, show that the monuments continued to capture the imagination and inspire wonder long after their original purpose was forgotten. As you continue to relax, picture yourself walking through one of these ancient sacred landscapes. The standing stones cast long shadows in the afternoon light. A dolmen rises from the earth ahead of you, its entrance dark and mysterious. All around, the gentle hills and valleys show signs of ancient cultivation. This is a place where past and present meet, where the boundary between the world we know and the world of our distant ancestors becomes thin. Let this peaceful scene carry you toward rest as our story continues. Who were the people who built the dolmens? What were their lives like? Though they left no written records, archaeology and science give us glimpses into their world. These were not primitive people struggling to survive, but skilled farmers and builders who created complex societies and remarkable monuments. The Neolithic people of Europe lived in communities that ranged from small hamlets of a few families to larger villages of several hundred people. Their houses were built of wood, with walls made of woven branches covered in clay or mud. Roofs were thatched with straw or reeds. These houses have long since disappeared, leaving only post holes and foundation trenches for archaeologists to find, but they were substantial structures designed to last for many years. Inside these houses, families cooked, ate, slept, and worked. Pottery vessels held grain, milk, and water. Wooden bowls and tools filled the space. Animal skins and woven fabrics provided warmth. The hearth at the center of the house was the heart of family life, providing heat for cooking and warmth against the cold nights. Around this fire, parents told stories to children, passing down the knowledge and traditions of their people. The work of farming filled their days. Fields had to be prepared, planted, tended, and harvested. This was done with simple tools, wooden plows, stone hoes, and flint sickles for cutting grain. The work was hard and required everyone's participation. Children as young as 5 or 6 would have helped with lighter tasks like scaring birds away from planted fields or gathering wild plants to supplement the family's diet. They grew wheat and barley as their main crops. In some regions, they also cultivated peas, lentils, and flax. The flax was particularly important because its fibers could be woven into linen cloth. Growing enough food to last through the winter was a constant challenge. Bad weather, crop disease, or pest infestations could mean hunger and hardship. Animal husbandry was equally important. Cattle provided milk, which could be made into cheese for longer storage. Sheep and goats gave wool and meat. Pigs could forage for food in forests and clearings. Dogs helped with herding and hunting. These animals had to be cared for daily, protected from predators, and sheltered in winter. Managing livestock required extensive knowledge of animal behavior and needs. Despite the hard work of farming, these communities found time and resources to build monuments. This tells us something important about their society. They must have been able to produce enough surplus food to support people while they worked on building projects. They had social structures that allowed them to organize large work parties. They valued certain things enough to invest enormous effort in creating them. The building of a dolmen was probably a community event, perhaps even involving several communities working together. It may have been tied to important social occasions like marriages, alliances between groups, or the death of important individuals. The work itself may have been seen as sacred, a way of honoring the ancestors and the gods. We know these people had specialists and skilled craftspeople. Someone had to know how to find good stone for tool making. Others needed to understand the properties of different types of rock for building. Potters needed knowledge of clay and firing techniques. These skills were learned through years of practice and passed down from master to apprentice. They also had artists. Some dolmens have carvings on their stones, spirals, circles, wavy lines, and geometric patterns. These carvings were not random doodles, but meaningful symbols, though their exact meaning is now lost to us. The time and effort required to carve these designs into hard stone shows they were important. They may have represented the sun and moon, water and wind, or concepts like life, death, and rebirth. Trade networks connected Neolithic communities across vast distances. Objects found in dolmens sometimes came from hundreds of miles away. A stone axe made from rock found only in one region might end up in a grave far away. Beads made from shells traveled inland from the coast. Copper and later bronze objects, which required specialized knowledge to produce, spread along trade routes. These trade networks were not just about exchanging goods. They also spread ideas, stories, and traditions. A person who traveled to a distant region to trade would return with tales of the monuments and customs they had seen. This may explain why dolmens, built far apart, share similar designs. The idea of building stone tombs spread through these networks of contact and exchange. Neolithic people lived with a constant awareness of death. Life expectancy was much shorter than today. Many children died before reaching adulthood. Childbirth was dangerous for mothers. Injuries and illnesses that we can easily treat today could be fatal. The dead were not hidden away, but remained present in the lives of the living through the monuments that held their remains. The relationship between the living and the dead was probably very different from our modern view. The ancestors were not gone, but continued to exist in another realm. They could help the living by ensuring good harvests, protecting against enemies, and maintaining the proper order of the world. In return, the living honored the dead through ceremonies, offerings, and the care of their tombs. Some researchers believe that certain individuals in Neolithic society served as intermediaries between the living and the dead. These might have been priests, shamans, or wise elders who knew the proper rituals and could communicate with ancestors. They would have played important roles during funerals and at ceremonies held at the dolmens. The clothing these people wore has not survived, but we can make educated guesses based on the materials they had. Leather from cattle, sheep, and goats would have been made into tunics, cloaks, and shoes. Linen woven from flax provided lighter garments for warm weather. Wool could be spun and woven into warm clothing for winter. Bone needles and thread made from animal sinew allowed them to sew these materials into fitted garments. Personal decoration was important. Beads made from shells, stones, and bones have been found in many graves. These were strung into necklaces, bracelets, and decorative elements sewn onto clothing. Some individuals were buried with special objects, polished stone axes that were too beautiful to be practical tools, or pottery vessels decorated with elaborate designs. These grave goods tell us that personal identity and social status mattered to these communities. As your body continues to relax and your breathing slows, imagine the daily rhythm of life in a Neolithic village. The sun rises over fields of golden grain. Smoke curls from house roofs as morning fires are lit. People emerge to begin their day's work, greeting neighbors and organizing tasks. In the distance, a dolmen stands on a hill, a constant reminder of those who came before and the continuity of community life. Let this peaceful vision guide you deeper into rest. Despite everything we have learned about dolmens through archaeology and research, much about them remains mysterious. The exact beliefs and ceremonies of the people who built them are lost to time. We can see what they did, but understanding why they did it requires us to interpret the evidence. And interpretation always involves some uncertainty and imagination. One of the enduring mysteries is the variety of dolmen styles across Europe. While all dolmens share the basic design of upright stones supporting a capstone, the details vary considerably from region to region. Some dolmens have short entrance passages leading to the burial chamber. Others have long corridors. Some are circular in plan, others rectangular. Some have a single chamber, while others have multiple connected chambers. In the Iberian Peninsula, spanning modern Spain and Portugal, many dolmens have long entrance passages that lead to a wider chamber at the back. These are called passage graves. The passages can be 30 feet long or more, and as you move through them toward the chamber, the ceiling gradually rises. This creates a dramatic architectural effect and may have had symbolic meaning related to the journey from death to the afterlife. In Ireland and Britain, some dolmens are simpler structures with no passage at all, just a chamber formed by upright stones and covered by a capstone. These are sometimes called portal dolmens because the entrance is often formed by two tall stones with a lower stone between them, creating a doorway effect. Other Irish dolmens have short passages and more complex chamber designs. The regional variations suggest that while the basic idea of building stone burial monuments spread across Europe, each area adapted the design to fit local traditions, needs, and perhaps different beliefs about death and the afterlife. This tells us that Neolithic Europe was not a uniform culture, but a patchwork of related but distinct communities, each with its own customs and practices. The carvings and decorations found on some dolmens add another layer of mystery. The most elaborate examples are found in Ireland, particularly at sites like Newgrange and Noath. Here, spirals, circles, and complex geometric patterns cover the stone surfaces. Some patterns are carved deeply into the rock, while others are more lightly etched. The spirals, in particular, have fascinated researchers and visitors for generations. What did these symbols mean? We can only speculate. Spirals appear in many ancient cultures around the world and often seem to represent cycles, journeys, or transformation. In the context of a tomb, a spiral might represent the journey of the soul or the cycle of life and death. Some researchers have suggested they represent the sun or water. Others think they might be maps of sacred landscapes or representations of the journey to the afterlife. The triple spiral, a motif found at Newgrange, where 3 spirals connect at their centers, is particularly intriguing. The number 3 appears frequently in Celtic mythology, which developed in Ireland long after the dolmens were built, but may have drawn on older traditions. 3 might have represented fundamental divisions of existence: the earth, sea and sky, or past, present and future, or birth, life and death. Some stones have cup marks, small circular depressions carved into the surface. These appear on dolmens across Europe and seem to be one of the most ancient and widespread forms of rock art. No one knows for certain what they represent, but they may have been related to offerings or rituals. Some researchers have suggested they represent stars or served as crude calendars. Another mystery concerns the selection of stones for dolmens. In some cases, builders transported specific types of stone over considerable distances when closer sources were available. This suggests that not just any stone would do. The rock itself may have had special properties or significance. Perhaps stones from certain locations were considered sacred or powerful. Perhaps their color texture or the way they rang when struck made them preferable for this sacred purpose. The orientation of dolmens has been studied extensively. While some alignments with solar and stellar events have been identified, not all dolmens show such alignments. Some face east toward the rising sun, which makes intuitive sense for monuments concerned with death and rebirth. Others face different directions with no obvious astronomical significance. This might mean that local landscape features were more important than celestial alignments for some communities, or that we simply do not yet understand the full range of factors that influenced orientation. The question of who was buried in dolmens has no single answer. Analysis of bones shows that men, women, and children of various ages were interred in these monuments. In some dolmens, dozens of individuals were buried over time. In others, only a few remains have been found. This variation might reflect differences in social structure. Perhaps some dolmens were family tombs, while others were reserved for community leaders or special individuals. The grave goods placed with the dead also vary. Some individuals were buried with numerous objects: pottery, tools, weapons, jewelry, and even food offerings. Others were laid to rest with little or nothing. This might indicate differences in social status, or it might reflect changes in burial customs over time as the same dolmen was used for generations. One puzzling aspect of many dolmens is evidence that bones were moved and rearranged after initial burial. When archaeologists carefully excavate a dolmen, they often find that the bones are not in their original positions. Skulls might be grouped together in one area, long bones in another. This suggests that people entered the tombs periodically and reorganized the remains, perhaps as part of ancestor rituals. Some researchers believe that Neolithic people practiced excarnation, where bodies were first left exposed until the flesh decayed, and then the cleaned bones were placed in the dolmen. This would explain why bones are often found in disarticulated piles rather than as complete skeletons. It would also mean that the dolmens were not sealed immediately after each death, but remained accessible for ritual use. The eventual abandonment of dolmens is another mystery. Around 4,000 years ago, the building of new dolmens gradually ceased across most of Europe. Some existing dolmens continued to be used for burials for a time, but the tradition slowly faded. New types of burial monuments appeared, including individual graves covered by round barrows. Society was changing, and with it, the ways people honored their dead. Why did the dolmen tradition end? The shift from communal tombs to individual graves might reflect changes in social organization. As populations grew and societies became more hierarchical, the emphasis may have shifted from group identity to individual status. New religious beliefs may have replaced the old ways of honoring ancestors, or perhaps the knowledge of how to build these massive monuments was gradually lost as societies changed. Despite their abandonment, many dolmens remained visible in the landscape. They were too massive to be easily destroyed or removed. Through the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Roman period, and the Middle Ages, they stood as mysterious reminders of a distant past. People created stories to explain them, attributing them to giants, gods, or ancient heroes. But the truth about their builders was forgotten until modern archaeology began to piece together the story. Let your mind drift now through these mysteries, like mist through the stones of an ancient dolmen. Do not try to solve them or understand everything. Simply let the questions and possibilities wash over you like gentle waves. The mysteries of the past have their own beauty, and sometimes not knowing can be as peaceful as knowing. Let these thoughts carry you into deeper relaxation as we near the end of our journey. The dolmens stand today as Europe's most enduring monuments to the Neolithic age. Though the people who built them vanished thousands of years ago, their work remains. The massive stones continue to balance, just as they were placed, defying time and weather. These monuments connect us to our distant past in a way that few other things can. In the modern era, dolmens have captured the imagination of countless people. Artists have painted them, poets have written about them, and millions of visitors each year make pilgrimages to see them. There is something deeply moving about standing before a structure built by human hands so long ago. It reminds us that people like ourselves, with hopes and fears, beliefs and dreams, lived and died in ages we can barely imagine. The study of dolmens has also taught us valuable lessons about ancient societies. We once assumed that complex architecture and large-scale building projects required written language, metal tools, and centralized governments. The dolmens prove this assumption wrong. Neolithic communities accomplished remarkable feats of engineering and construction with Stone Age technology and without writing. They did this through cooperation, shared knowledge, and social organization. This tells us something important about human capability and ingenuity. Given motivation and working together, humans can accomplish extraordinary things, regardless of their technological level. The dolmen builders were every bit as intelligent and creative as we are. They simply lived in a different time, with different resources and challenges. The dolmens also remind us of the importance humans have always placed on honoring the dead and maintaining connections with ancestors. Across cultures and throughout history, people have built monuments to the dead. From the pyramids of Egypt to the elaborate tombs of China, from Native American burial mounds to modern cemeteries, the impulse to mark death and remember the departed seems to be a fundamental part of being human. In this sense, the dolmens are deeply relatable. Though we cannot know exactly what the Neolithic people believed about death and the afterlife, we can recognize in their monuments the same need we feel to honor those we have lost and to mark our place in the continuing story of humanity. The dolmen says, "I was here, we were here, and we matter." That message resonates across the millennia. Modern threats face these ancient monuments. Agricultural development, road building, and urban expansion have destroyed some dolmens. Others suffer from vandalism or are damaged by visitors who climb on them or remove stones as souvenirs. Recognizing their value, many European countries now protect dolmens as important archaeological sites. Laws prohibit damaging them, and efforts are made to preserve them for future generations. Some dolmens have been restored or stabilized to prevent their collapse. This work is done carefully, using archaeological evidence to ensure the restoration is as authentic as possible. When earthen mounds have eroded away, the question arises whether they should be rebuilt. Some sites have chosen to restore the mounds to show visitors what the monument originally looked like. Others leave the stone structure exposed, as it has stood for centuries. The dolmens have influenced modern architecture and art in surprising ways. The simple, powerful forms of standing stones and balanced capstones have inspired sculptors and designers. The concept of marking landscape with massive stone structures has been revived in modern earth art and monumental sculpture. Artists see in the dolmens a pure expression of form and space that speaks to something fundamental in human aesthetics. For archaeologists, dolmens remain subjects of active research. New techniques constantly yield new insights. Ground-penetrating radar can reveal buried features without excavation. Chemical analysis of bones can tell us what people ate and where they lived before being buried in the dolmen. DNA analysis is beginning to reveal relationships between individuals buried in the same tomb and to trace population movements in prehistoric Europe. These scientific studies paint an increasingly detailed picture of Neolithic life. We now know that farming spread across Europe from the Middle East, carried by migrating populations who brought their crops, animals, and building traditions with them. We know that these farmers mixed and intermarried with the hunter-gatherer populations they encountered. The dolmen builders were the result of this mixing, inheriting traditions from both farming and hunting cultures. We also know that Neolithic Europe was more connected than we once thought. People traveled, traded, and shared ideas across vast distances. A person buried in a dolmen in Ireland might have worn beads that came from the Mediterranean. The design of that Irish dolmen might have been influenced by ideas that originated in Iberia or France. These connections show that even in the Stone Age, Europe was a network of interacting communities, not isolated tribes. The legacy of the dolmens extends beyond their physical presence and scientific value. They have become symbols of mystery, antiquity, and human achievement. They appear in films, books, and popular culture as shorthand for ancient times and lost civilizations. They inspire wonder in children and adults alike, sparking curiosity about the past and our place in the long story of human history. Many dolmens have become gathering places once again in modern times. People visit them not just as tourists, but as seekers of something deeper. Some come looking for a connection to the earth and to ancient ways of living. Others find in these silent stones a place for meditation and reflection. The dolmens, built as places where the living could connect with the dead, continue to serve as liminal spaces where past and present meet. Local communities often feel a special connection to dolmens in their area. These monuments are part of the landscape they have known all their lives. Stories about them are passed down through families. Children play near them, though their parents warn them to treat the old stones with respect. Farmers work around them, preserving them even when they stand in the middle of productive fields. This continued presence in local life ensures that the dolmens remain part of living communities rather than isolated museum pieces. Educational programs now use dolmens to teach children about prehistoric life. School groups visit the monuments and participate in activities that help them understand how Neolithic people lived. They might grind grain using stone tools, weave cloth on simple looms, or try their hand at ancient crafts. These hands-on experiences make the distant past real and immediate, helping young people appreciate the intelligence and skill of ancient builders. The dolmens also teach us about the impermanence of human works, even those built to last forever. Many monuments have fallen or been destroyed. The earth reclaims them slowly but surely. Stones that took hundreds of people to erect can be toppled by time, weather, and the shifting of the ground beneath them. This reminds us that nothing lasts forever, no matter how solid it seems. Yet even in their fallen state, these stones speak to us of human ambition and achievement. Some of the most moving dolmens are those that stand alone in remote places, far from modern roads and towns. To reach them, you must walk across fields or climb hills, following paths that may have been used for thousands of years. The journey to these remote monuments becomes part of the experience. As you walk, You see the landscape as the builders saw it. You feel the wind that has blown across these hills since before history began. You arrive at the dolmen tired from your walk, and the monument feels like a destination, a goal reached, just as it must have felt to ancient people who came here for ceremonies and burials. Other dolmens stand in the midst of modern development, surrounded by houses or next to busy roads. These urban dolmens present a striking contrast between ancient and modern. A structure built 5,000 years ago sits next to buildings less than a century old. Children walk past it on their way to school. Traffic rushes by a few meters away. These monuments remind urban dwellers that their cities were built on land where people lived for thousands of years before them. History is not something distant, but is literally underfoot, beneath the pavement and buildings of the present. The question of what should be done with human remains found in dolmens has been the subject of much debate. In the past, bones were often removed and stored in museums or simply discarded. Modern practice treats such remains with more respect. Many archaeologists and indigenous rights advocates argue that if possible, human remains should be left in place or reburied. The people buried in dolmens rest in the places their communities chose for them. Disturbing that rest, even in the name of science, raises ethical questions that each generation must answer according to its own values. Some countries have developed protocols for dealing with ancient burials. Archaeological investigations are still permitted when they can yield important knowledge, but they must be conducted respectfully. The remains are studied to learn what they can teach us about ancient life, health, and society. But then they are carefully reburied, sometimes in the original dolmen, sometimes in a protected location nearby. This balance between scientific inquiry and respect for the dead reflects our modern attempt to honor both knowledge and human dignity. The dolmens have survived so long partly because of their massive size and solid construction, but also because they were built of stone, not wood or earth. This makes them different from many other aspects of Neolithic life, which have left little trace. The houses people lived in, the clothes they wore, the songs they sang, and most of the objects they used have vanished. But the dolmens remain, and in remaining, they become the most visible and tangible link to that distant time. As archaeologists continue to study these monuments, new discoveries still occur. Recently explored dolmens sometimes surprises unusual grave goods, unexpected construction techniques, or evidence of use patterns that challenge our assumptions. Each discovery adds a small piece to the puzzle of understanding Neolithic life. The complete picture may never be known, but with each study, we come a little closer to understanding our ancestors. The tradition of building with massive stones continued beyond the Neolithic. Later cultures erected standing stones, stone circles like Stonehenge, and other megalithic monuments. While these later structures had different purposes and meanings, they were inspired by the same impulse that led Neolithic people to work with massive stones. The desire to create something permanent, something that would outlast any individual life or generation and make a statement about human presence in the landscape. In this way, the dolmen builders pioneered a tradition that continues in various forms to this day. We still create monuments to mark important places and events. We still use architecture to express beliefs and values. We still feel the need to leave our mark, to say that we were here and that we mattered. The forms have changed, but the fundamental human impulse remains the same across thousands of years. As you lie here now, warm and comfortable, your breathing slow and steady, think about the long chain of humanity stretching back through time. The people who built the dolmens were part of that chain, as are you. They looked up at the same stars you see, felt the same sun on their faces, and loved their families as you love yours. The dolmens they built stand as testament to their lives, and their desire to create something lasting. In learning about them and preserving their monuments, we honor them and acknowledge our connection to them across the vast gulf of time. The night has deepened around you as our story draws to a close. The dolmens stand in the darkness, just as they have stood through countless nights for thousands of years. They will be there tomorrow when the sun rises, and they will likely stand for thousands of years more. They are patient, these old stones. They have seen generations come and go, empires rise and fall, and the landscape around them change in ways their builders could never have imagined. Yet they remain, solid and enduring, connecting earth to sky, past to present, the living to the dead. Let the image of a dolmen fill your mind one last time. See the massive stones in the soft light of dawn or dusk, when shadows are long and the world is quiet. Feel the peace that surrounds these ancient places. Know that you are connected to the people who built them through your shared humanity. Let that connection comfort you. Let the weight and solidity of the stones in your imagination anchor you in this moment of rest. Let the millennia of peace that these monuments have witnessed flow into you, calming your thoughts and relaxing your body completely. The dolmens have kept their silent watch for 5,000 years or more. They will keep watching as you drift into peaceful sleep. They stand as guardians of memory, keepers of ancient stories, and witnesses to the enduring human spirit. In their shadow, you can rest safely, knowing that you are part of a story that began long ago and will continue long after. The dolmens remind us that while individual lives are brief, humanity endures, and the things we build, both physical and spiritual, can outlast us by millennia. Sleep now, knowing that the mysteries of the past are still there, waiting in the stones, and that tomorrow you can wake to explore them further if you wish. But for now, let the weight of history, the solidity of stone, and the peace of ancient places carry you into deep, restorative sleep. The dolmens stand watch as they have always done. You are safe. You are connected. You are part of something larger than yourself that stretches back to the beginning of civilization and forward into an unknown future. Rest now beneath the stone table of the giants. Let sleep come as gently as lichen growing on ancient rock, as slowly as the sun moving across a Neolithic sky, as peacefully as bones resting undisturbed in their stone chamber for 5,000 years. The story is told. The journey is complete. The dolmens stand eternal, and you can rest.